The sanctuary was filled with calm, soft worship music echoed through the massive church as thousands of people sat quietly in their seats, waiting for Joel Osteen to step onto the stage. It was a typical Sunday, peaceful, orderly, and full of expectation. Ushers moved smoothly through the aisles, security stood discreetly at their posts, and cameras were already rolling. In the back section of the church, a tall man dressed in dark, simple clothing sat quietly. No entourage, no attention-seeking behavior, just stillness. His posture was relaxed, almost disciplined, as if he were used to controlling his presence in public spaces. That man was Steven Seagal. He hadn't come as a celebrity. He hadn't asked for special treatment. He came like anyone else, seeking a moment of reflection, anonymity, and peace. Most people around him had no idea who he was, but someone noticed. A security team member leaned in toward Joel Osteen near the side of the stage and whispered something into his ear. Joel glanced briefly toward the back of the church. His expression tightened, not with anger, but concern. From the stage, Joel quietly nodded. Moments later, two security guards began walking down the aisle toward Steven Seagal. At first, no one paid attention. Churches have security for many reasons, but as the guards stopped directly in front of Steven, something felt off. One guard leaned in and spoke in a low voice. "Sir, we need you to step outside." Steven looked up slowly, calm and composed. He didn't argue. He didn't react emotionally. He simply asked, politely, "May I ask why?" The guard hesitated. "You're causing a distraction." "A distraction?" Steven glanced around. No noise, no movement, no disruption. Just people beginning to notice what was happening. Whispers spread across the pews. Why are they removing him? What did he do? Is something wrong? Phones began to rise. Steven took a breath and stood up, not aggressively, not defensively, but with quiet confidence. His presence suddenly felt heavier, more grounded, as if the room itself had shifted. Joel Osteen remained on stage, unaware of the growing tension. And that's when it became clear this wasn't just a misunderstanding. What was about to happen would leave the entire church silent, because what Steven Seagal did next, no one saw coming. The security guard waited. Steven Seagal remained standing in the aisle, calm, unmoving. He wasn't blocking anyone. He wasn't speaking loudly. He wasn't resisting. Yet the eyes of the room were slowly turning toward him. "Sir," the guard repeated, firmer this time, "we need you to step outside now." Steven's voice stayed low and respectful. "I'm not causing any trouble. I came here to listen." The second guard shifted uncomfortably. People nearby could feel it. This wasn't about safety anymore. It was about control. Joel Osteen stood on stage, flipping through his notes, unaware that the atmosphere in his own church was changing. The worship music faded. A strange silence settled in its place. A woman in the front row turned around, then another, then another. Steven slowly scanned the room. No anger in his eyes, no fear, just awareness. Years of discipline on screen and off had taught him something powerful. When pressure rises, stillness becomes strength. One of the guards whispered sharply, "Sir, please don't make this difficult." Steven nodded slightly. "I'm not," he replied. "I just want to understand." That sentence, calm, controlled, seemed to irritate the guard even more. A man a few rows away quietly raised his phone. Then another person did the same. Within seconds, small red recording lights flickered across the room. People sensed injustice before they could explain it. Steven took one slow step into the aisle, giving the guards space, not backing down, but not challenging them either. His movements were deliberate, measured, respectful. Someone whispered, "Why are they treating him like this?" Another voice followed, louder this time. "He hasn't done anything." The guards exchanged glances. This wasn't going as planned. Steven's presence, silent, composed, was now the center of attention. And ironically, the attempt to quietly remove him had created the very distraction they claimed he was causing. Still, Steven did not raise his voice. He did not announce his name. He did not demand respect. Instead, he stood there, allowing the moment to expose itself. That's when the narrator pauses and asks the audience directly, "Have you ever seen someone treated unfairly in a public place by people in power? Tell me in the comments, and let me know which country and city you're watching from right now." Back in the church, the tension thickened. The guards stepped closer. One reached toward Steven's arm, not forcefully, but enough to cross a line. Steven gently lifted his hand, stopping the motion without touching him. Please, he said calmly. Let's keep this respectful. The words hit harder than shouting ever could. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some people were now standing. Others shook their heads in disbelief. Joel Osteen finally looked up from the stage, sensing something was wrong, but he couldn't yet see the full picture. Steven Seagal remained in place, unmoved, unbroken, unprovoked, and the more he refused to react with anger, the more uncomfortable the situation became for everyone else. Because in that moment, it was clear, this wasn't about removing a man from a church. It was about how power treats silence, and the moment was only beginning to escalate. The air inside the church felt heavier now. What had begun as a quiet service had turned into a moment no one could ignore. Steven Seagal stood in the aisle, security on either side of him, the crowd watching in uneasy silence. Every breath felt louder. Every movement felt magnified. One of the guards leaned in closer, his voice tight and controlled. "Sir, you're refusing a direct request. We don't want this to escalate." Steven met his eyes calmly. "I'm not refusing," he said. "I'm standing peacefully." That distinction mattered, but not to everyone. A second guard shifted his stance, placing his hand near his radio. Not calling for backup yet, just enough to signal authority, enough to intimidate. Steven noticed. So did everyone else. In the third row, a man shook his head slowly. In the back, a woman whispered, "This isn't right." Phones continued recording, hands trembling slightly as people realized they were witnessing something bigger than a misunderstanding. Steven could feel it too. He knew he could leave. He knew walking away would end it immediately, but he also knew something else. Walking away wouldn't make this right. He wasn't angry. He wasn't trying to prove anything. But there was a quiet principle at stake, one that didn't require shouting, only presence. "Sir," the guard said again, firmer now, "please step outside." Steven inhaled slowly. His voice stayed level. "I came here with respect," he replied. "I'll leave when I'm given a reason." That sentence landed like a stone dropped into still water. Ripples spread. A few people stood up now, not aggressively, just to see better. Someone whispered loudly enough for others to hear. "Why won't they explain?" Joel Osteen remained on stage, partially shielded by lights and distance. He could sense something unfolding, but the details were still unclear. The crowd's attention had shifted completely away from him. This was no longer about a sermon. It was about a moment. One guard took a step closer, invading Steven's personal space. "Sir, don't make this difficult." Steven didn't flinch. "I'm not," he said. "I'm choosing peace." That word peace felt ironic in the charged atmosphere, but coming from Steven, it carried weight. His stillness wasn't weakness, it was discipline. Years of martial arts training had taught him something most people never learn. True control begins with controlling yourself. The crowd sensed it, the guards felt it, and that made them uneasy. Because intimidation doesn't work on someone who refuses to be intimidated. A child somewhere in the audience asked quietly, "Mom, why are they mad at him?" The mother didn't answer. Steven glanced briefly toward the exits. They were open. He could walk away at any moment. Cameras would stop, tension would dissolve, but then the narrative would stay the same. Authority unquestioned, silence rewarded, discomfort ignored. Steven straightened his posture not aggressively, but decisively. "I will leave peacefully," he said, "but only after this is handled with respect." The guards exchanged looks. This wasn't in the script. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't resisting. He wasn't giving them anything to react to. And that was the problem, because now, every eye in the church was on them. If you were standing where Steven is right now, would you quietly walk away to avoid trouble? Or would you stand your ground calmly, like he's doing? Be honest. Comment below. Back inside the church, the tension reached a breaking point. One guard spoke into his radio in a low voice. Not a call for force, but for guidance. For someone higher up to decide what to do. The crowd murmured louder now. The atmosphere had shifted from confusion to discomfort and then to quiet resistance. Steven remained motionless. No clenched fists, no raised voice, no ego, just presence. And that presence was exposing something uncomfortable not about him, but about the situation itself. Finally, a voice from the side of the room whispered, uncertain but clear, "Wait, is that who I think it is?" Another voice followed, "No way." A third leaned forward, squinting. The guards didn't hear it yet. Steven did. He closed his eyes briefly, not in fear, but in patience, because he knew something was coming. Not confrontation, not violence, but recognition. And once that door opened, nothing would be the same. At first, it was just a whisper, so quiet it almost disappeared into the hum of the room. Wait, is that Steven Seagal? The words didn't travel far at first, just one row, then another. A man leaned forward, squinting through the dim light toward the aisle where the guard stood. His brow furrowed, his eyes widened. No way, he murmured. That can't be him, but curiosity is contagious. A woman lifted her phone higher, zooming in. Someone else tilted their head, studying the man's posture, the calm stance. The unmistakable stillness of someone trained far beyond ordinary confidence. That looks like him, she whispered. The actor, the martial artist. The whisper moved again, faster this time. Steven Seagal stood exactly where he had been the entire time, hands relaxed at his sides, shoulders squared, breathing steady. He felt the shift before he heard it. The subtle change in the room, the way confusion was giving way to realization. Still, he said nothing. He didn't turn to the crowd. He didn't correct anyone. He didn't use his name as a shield. The guards, unaware of what was happening behind them, remained focused on procedure. One glanced down the aisle, clearly uncomfortable now that so many people were standing, watching, recording. "What's going on?" someone asked out loud. Another voice answered, louder this time. "I think that's Steven Seagal." That did it. Heads turned in unison. Phones came up higher. A low murmur rolled through the church like a slow wave. "That's him? He looks different. Why would they remove him? Why is he being treated like this?" Steven closed his eyes for a brief moment, not in relief, not in fear, but in restraint. He had spent decades in the public eye. He knew how quickly recognition could change a moment. And he also knew how easily it could turn the wrong way. When he opened his eyes again, his expression hadn't changed. The guards finally sensed it. One of them turned, scanning the crowd, noticing the phones, the faces, the sudden tension that had nothing to do with security anymore. "What's happening?" the guard asked quietly. No one answered him directly. Instead, someone a few rows back said it clearly enough for everyone to hear. "That's Steven Seagal. Why are you removing him?" The question landed hard. The guards froze not because they were afraid, but because the situation had suddenly grown larger than them, larger than policy, larger than procedure. Steven took a slow breath. "This isn't necessary," he said calmly. "I don't want special treatment." That sentence stopped more people than shouting ever could. He wasn't denying it. He wasn't confirming it loudly, but he wasn't hiding either. Joel Osteen stood on stage, now fully aware that something serious was unfolding. He leaned slightly forward, trying to see past the lights, his expression tightening as the murmurs reached him. "What's going on?" he asked quietly into his microphone. No one answered immediately. The crowd was too focused on the man in the aisle. Steven's calm presence now stood in sharp contrast to the confusion around him. The irony was impossible to miss. The man being treated as a problem was the most composed person in the room. One guard leaned closer to Steven, his voice lowered. "Sir, are you?" Steven met his eyes gently. "I came here for peace," he replied, "not recognition." The guard swallowed. Behind them, the whispers had turned into certainty. People nodded to each other. Some looked angry not at Steven, but at the situation. Others looked embarrassed, realizing how quickly assumptions had been made. Phones continued recording, not aggressively now, but carefully, as if everyone understood they were witnessing something that would matter later. Steven shifted his weight slightly, still grounded, still present. "I don't want this to become a spectacle," he said softly. But it already was, not because of who he was, but because of how he was being treated. Joel Osteen stepped closer to the edge of the stage, his face now serious, scanning the room. Security radio chatter crackled softly. The room waited. And in that silence, one truth became unavoidable. This moment was no longer about removing a man from a seat. It was about respect, and the decision that came next would define everything. The silence was no longer uncomfortable. It was heavy. Joel Osteen stood at the edge of the stage now, no longer focused on his notes, no longer distant from what was happening in the aisle. The murmurs had reached him clearly. One word, repeated again and again, impossible to ignore. "Seagal." Joel's expression changed not with panic, but with concern. He turned slightly toward the security director standing near the stage and spoke quietly. "What's going on?" The director hesitated, then leaned in. There was a report of a disturbance. Security asked the man to leave. The crowd recognized him. Joel looked back toward the aisle. For the first time, he saw Steven Seagal clearly, not as a headline, not as a celebrity, but as a man standing calmly while the entire room watched him be questioned. Joel felt a tightening in his chest. This was not how this was supposed to look. Down in the aisle, the guard stood frozen, caught between procedure and perception. The room had turned against the situation, not violently, not loudly, but morally. Steven sensed it too. He spoke again, his voice steady, measured, carrying without force. "I don't want attention," he said. "I didn't come here as someone important. I came here as a guest." Every word landed cleanly. Joel stepped down from the stage. The movement alone sent a ripple through the crowd. People leaned forward. Phones adjusted. A quiet anticipation filled the air. Joel approached slowly, not defensively, not rushed. His tone, when he spoke, was calm but serious. "Sir," he said, "I want to understand what's happening." Steven turned toward him respectfully. "I was asked to leave," Steven replied. "I asked for a reason." Joel looked to security. "Was there a reason?" he asked. No one answered immediately. The pause said everything. Joel exhaled slowly. He glanced around at the congregation, the confusion, the discomfort, the realization that something had gone wrong. Then he looked back at Steven. "I owe you an explanation," Joel said, "and possibly an apology." The room went completely silent. Steven didn't smile. He didn't nod. He didn't press the moment. Instead, he spoke quietly, but clearly. "Respect," he said, "should never depend on who someone is." The sentence cut through the air. Not sharp, not angry, just true. "You didn't know my name when this started," Steven continued. "And that's okay. You shouldn't need to." Joel listened closely, his face serious, reflective. "What matters," Steven added, "is how people are treated before they're recognized." No one moved. No one spoke. The guards lowered their eyes. Joel nodded slowly. "You're right," he said. He turned to the security team. "This is on us," Joel said firmly. "We should have handled this better." He turned back to Steven. "I'm sorry." The word carried weight. Not as a performance, not for the cameras, but because it wasn't easy to say. Steven held Joel's gaze for a moment. Then he responded. "I don't need an apology for myself," he said. "I just hope the next person is treated with the same dignity you're offering me now." That's when something shifted completely. The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't clap yet. They absorbed it. Because this wasn't about a famous man being recognized. It was about accountability. Joel straightened. "Please," he said, gesturing gently toward the seats. "You are welcome here." Steven paused, not because he doubted the invitation, but because he understood the moment. "I'll stay," he said finally, "if it serves as a reminder." Joel nodded. "It does." The guards stepped back. The aisle cleared. And for the first time since it began, the tension released not in noise, but in relief. Yet everyone in the room knew one thing. This moment wasn't over, because what had just happened would not stay inside these walls, and the real consequences were still to come. The silence didn't last long. Joel Osteen stood beside Steven Seagal in the aisle, the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone in the room. Thousands of people watched not as spectators anymore, but as witnesses. Joel turned slowly toward the congregation. "I want to address what just happened," he said, his voice steady but sincere. The church fell completely silent. "This was not handled the way it should have been," Joel continued. "And for that, I take responsibility." The words landed hard. Public accountability is never easy, especially in front of thousands. Joel didn't rush. He didn't soften it. He let the moment breathe. "I allowed a situation to unfold without understanding it fully," he said, "and someone who came here seeking peace was made to feel unwelcome." He turned back toward Steven. "I am truly sorry." Steven nodded slightly, not dramatically, not triumphantly, just acknowledging the moment. Security stood frozen nearby, faces tense, realizing they were now part of a lesson unfolding in real time. The same authority they had relied on minutes earlier now felt fragile. Joel addressed them next. "This isn't about policy," he said firmly. "It's about people." The guards lowered their heads. One stepped back. Another unclipped his radio. Suddenly unsure of where to stand, Steven finally spoke again, his voice calm but resonant. "I don't want anyone punished for this," he said. "Moments like these aren't meant for blame. They're meant for reflection." A ripple moved through the crowd. Steven turned slightly. addressing not just Joel, but everyone. "If respect only appears after recognition," he said, "then we've already failed." The words hit deeper than applause ever could. Joel nodded, visibly moved. "You're right," he said quietly. Then, something unexpected happened. Joel gestured toward Steven and addressed the crowd again. "This man was asked to leave," he said, "before anyone knew who he was. That should never matter." He paused. "But now that we do know," Joel continued, "we should listen carefully to what he's showing us." The crowd erupted not in cheers, but in applause, slow at first, then louder, then unified. Steven raised his hand gently. "Please," he said softly, asking for quiet. The applause faded immediately. "I didn't come here to teach," Steven said. "But if this moment teaches anything, let it be this." He paused, scanning the faces around him. Treat people right the first time. That was it. No speech, no sermon, no ego, just truth. Joel stepped closer and extended his hand, not for show, not for cameras, but in genuine reconciliation. Steven took it. The handshake wasn't dramatic. It didn't last long, but it meant everything. Phones captured it instantly. Across the room, whispers turned into quiet conversations. That took courage. He didn't embarrass him. He handled that with grace. Security slowly dispersed, their posture different now, less rigid, more human. Steven returned to his seat, this time with space around him, not because he demanded it, but because people instinctively gave it. Joel returned to the stage, but the service was no longer the same. The sermon that followed felt different. Every word about humility, grace, and accountability now carried real weight because the congregation had just lived it. If you were Steven Seagal in that moment, would you forgive Joel Osteen publicly like this? Type yes if you believe forgiveness makes us stronger, or no if you think accountability should come first. Inside the church, calm returned, but it wasn't the same calm as before. It was deeper, more honest, because everyone understood one thing now. This moment would not stay in this building. Someone would upload the video, someone would tell the story, and when the world saw how power, humility, and respect collided in a single moment, the conversation would only grow louder. It didn't take long. By the time the service ended, clips were already circulating online. Short videos, shaky footage, quiet audio but powerful enough to tell the story. A man asked to leave a church, calm under pressure, respect without recognition. Within hours, the footage exploded. Social media feeds filled with the same questions. Why was he removed? Why did respect come after recognition? What would have happened if he wasn't famous? People didn't argue about Steven Seagal's movies or legacy. They talked about his composure, his restraint, his refusal to embarrass anyone even when he could have. News outlets picked up the story by the next morning. Headlines didn't focus on conflict. They focused on contrast. A powerful figure humbled, a misunderstood guest dignified, a moment that exposed something uncomfortable and healed it at the same time. Comment sections flooded in. This happens every day to regular people. He didn't raise his voice once. That's real strength. This wasn't about fame, it was about character. Joel Osteen addressed the moment later that week. Not defensively, not dismissively, but honestly. He spoke about leadership, about blind spots, about how easy it is to make assumptions when systems move faster than understanding. "I learned something that day," he said. "Not because I was corrected loudly, but because I was corrected kindly." Steven Seagal, when asked for comment, kept it simple. "I didn't go there to make a statement," he said, "but sometimes life gives you one anyway." He refused interviews that tried to frame it as a victory. There was nothing to win, he added, only something to learn, and that response only deepened the respect. The video continued to spread not because it was shocking, but because it was rare. In a world full of outrage, this moment offered something different: control instead of confrontation, grace instead of ego, reflection instead of revenge. People began sharing their own stories, times they were judged before being known, dismissed before being heard, treated differently because they didn't look like they belonged. And suddenly, the moment inside that church became bigger than Steven Seagal. It became a mirror, a reminder that respect shouldn't be conditional, that dignity shouldn't depend on status, that how we treat someone before we recognize them says everything about who we are. Steven never asked for praise. Joel never tried to erase the moment. Both men let the lesson speak for itself, and that's why it lasted. Because it wasn't scripted, it wasn't rehearsed, it was human. The kind of moment that stays with you long after the screen goes dark. The kind of moment that asks a quiet question. How do we treat people when no one's watching? If you believe respect should never depend on fame, status, or appearance, type respect in the comments. And if you want more real stories about dignity, humility, and quiet strength, subscribe to the channel, because sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is stay calm, stay kind, and stand for what's right without ever raising their voice.